Richard Ashford wasn't supposed to be home. His jet from Singapore was due tomorrow, his staff informed. His 8-year-old son prepared for another night without him. Instead, a canceled meeting brought him back to Chicago 14 hours early, stepping into his $40 million penthouse with the weary drift of a man who lived more in airports than in his own life. The place should have been silent. Richard loosened his tie, set his briefcase down, already thinking about emails when he heard it. Voices. He froze. Not the sound of a TV. Not staff working. Real voices flowing down the hallway. A woman's voice, warm, steady. A child's voice, bright and rising. And underneath it all, the sound that stopped his breath. Oliver's laughter. His son almost never laughed. Autism had turned words into obstacles. Every sentence was a battle. He'd spent fortunes on specialists who promised miracles and delivered inches. Laughter had become rare. Now it echoed through the penthouse, light and unforced. Richard slipped off his shoes and moved quietly toward the sound. As he walked, the voices sharpened into languages: French, Spanish, Mandarin. The cadence was so smooth he wondered if someone had put on a video. Then he heard Oliver answer. His son's voice, usually halting, rose clearly, repeating Mandarin with perfect tones. Richard's heart hammered. He reached the cracked study door and pushed it open. Celeste, his maid, the woman he'd barely spoken to beyond instructions, sat cross-legged on the carpet. Her uniform replaced by simple clothes. Flashcards and hand-drawn maps surrounded her in careful piles, little bridges between worlds. Across from her sat Oliver, knees tucked in, eyes bright, fully present in a way Richard hadn't seen in years. Celeste pointed to a card. "Nikon," she said gently. "Remember this?" Oliver lifted his chin. "Shueshi shuyao naishin haai." Learning requires patience and love. Richard's breath caught. That exact phrase had been said to him in Shanghai 2 weeks earlier by a business partner. It wasn't beginner language. Yet his son, his silent, struggling boy, spoke it as if it lived in him. Oliver giggled when Celeste clapped in praise. Then he bounced through greetings: bonjour, hola, ciao, his mouth shaping the sounds easily, joyfully. For a brief moment, Richard felt only awe. Then shock crashed in, tangled with confusion and a sharp resentment. How had this happened without him knowing? For 2 years, Celeste had moved through his home quietly, folding shirts, scrubbing floors, offering polite greetings. He knew her schedule, not her story. And here she was, unlocking his son with nothing but patience and paper. Richard stepped inside. Celeste jolted up. The warmth vanished from her eyes as she straightened, hands folding automatically. The invisible wall between employer and employee snapped into place. "Mr. Ashford," she said quickly, "I didn't expect you. You weren't due until tomorrow. I'll start dinner now." Oliver's smile fell. He looked between them, sensing tension instantly. Richard scanned the flashcards, the maps, the scattered notes. His jaw tightened. "What is this?" he asked, colder than he meant to. "What exactly are you doing with my son?" 3 days later, crisis slammed into Ashford Investments before sunrise. Their $40 million Italian deal, months of work, was suddenly collapsing. The firm's professional translator had an emergency and boarded a plane to Boston. No backup, no replacements available. Giuseppe Romano, the Italian patriarch known for walking out over small insults, was landing in 6 hours. "If we don't find a translator, we lose the deal," Richard's partner, David, barked over the phone. "Get creative." Creative. The word triggered a memory. Oliver speaking Italian phrases with Celeste, his maid, as if he'd been preparing for a world tour. But the idea of bringing her into a boardroom full of executives felt absurd. How would his partners react? How would clients react? Yet as minutes ticked by, options imploded. Agencies wanted 48 hours notice. Remote interpreters couldn't handle nuanced cultural negotiation. Richard had one choice left, even if it terrified him. He found Celeste in the laundry room, folding his shirts with her usual calm efficiency. "I need your help," he said, awkwardly. She paused mid-fold. "Of course, sir." He explained the situation, the missing translator, the stakes, the risk. She listened without interruption. "You speak Italian fluently," he said finally. "Fairly well," she corrected softly. "You're fluent," he insisted. "I heard you." A beat of silence. "I want you to translate the Romano meeting." Celeste blinked, stunned. "Sir, I've never translated in a corporate environment. Not at this level. I'll pay you for your time, he added. But if it goes wrong, she finished the sentence for him. You won't let me keep teaching Oliver. He inhaled sharply. It would complicate things. Her face didn't harden, but something inside her did. Still, she nodded. I understand. Then, steadier. I'll do it. The next 5 hours blurred. Celeste sat at Richard's dining table surrounded by legal documents, manufacturing terminology, and cultural notes. She scribbled translations, rearranged metaphors, and practiced aloud. Her focus was razor-sharp. When she arrived at the 42nd floor boardroom, she wore her one formal suit, slightly loose from age, carefully pressed. Richard introduced her. His partners stared. Richard, this is our translator? James whispered, not quietly enough. Before Richard could answer, Romano entered, imposing, elegant, eyes assessing everyone. He began speaking rapid-fire Italian, thick dialect, probing for weakness. Celeste met his gaze and answered in his dialect. Smooth, precise, respectful. Romano froze, then nodded, impressed. The negotiation unfolded like a maze of liabilities, payment structures, legal nuance. Celeste translated not only words, but intent. She softened American bluntness, clarified Italian idioms, and bridged cultural assumptions with ease. When Romano used a regional expression meaning heritage before profit, she captured the emotion for the Americans. When Richard spoke corporate jargon, she reframed it into language that fit Romano's worldview. The old man leaned forward, increasingly animated. Then he mentioned his granddaughter wanting to learn Mandarin. Celeste shifted seamlessly into Mandarin, offered a proverb, then translated it into Italian. Romano laughed, deep, delighted. A 4-hour meeting finished in 90 minutes. Romano signed preliminary papers, shook Richard's hand, but clasped Celeste with both of his. Rara intelligenza, he said warmly. A rare intelligence. After he left, silence filled the room. David exhaled. She just saved the deal. Patricia nodded, awed. James wasn't convinced. Behind closed doors, he confronted Richard. We can't have your maid in multi-million-dollar negotiations, he snapped. No credentials, no clearance, no NDA. It's a liability. Patricia added carefully, clients won't understand it, Richard. She's extraordinary, but the world won't see her that way. James leaned in. You want her to be a prodigy. But she cleans floors. That's how people will see her. Richard bristled. She just accomplished what professionals couldn't. James shook his head. Be careful, Richard. Don't confuse a miracle for a system. And for the first time in years, Richard didn't have an answer. The crisis arrived disguised as homework. Lincoln Park Academy announced its annual International Day. 3rd grade was assigned Egypt, complete with costumes and speeches. Mrs. Whitmore, overwhelmed and pressed for time, printed a 3-paragraph Arabic welcome message straight from Google Translate and handed it to Oliver, 1 week before showtime. For Oliver, public speaking was a nightmare. Memorization was torture. Arabic was impossible. When he got home and unfolded the paper, he broke. I can't do this, he cried, pacing his room. Everyone will laugh. I'll mess up. I always mess up. Richard watched helplessly. He had postponed his London trip once already, but work was pressing. He didn't know how to fix this. Celeste found Oliver crumpled on the floor, face buried in his knees. Sweetheart, she said gently, can I show you a trick? He sniffed. I can't do it. I didn't ask if you could, she replied softly. Just if I can show you something. His curiosity flickered. Celeste unfolded the assignment, took one look, and sighed. We're throwing this away, she said. This isn't Arabic anyone speaks. Over the next 5 days, during lunch breaks, after cleaning shifts, in stolen minutes, Celeste rebuilt the entire speech from scratch. She rewrote the text in authentic Egyptian dialect. She broke each line into phonetic pieces Oliver already knew. She drew pyramids, rivers, stick figures, turning vocabulary into story. Then she added movement. Each phrase had a gesture. Rising hands for sunrise, sweeping arms for the Nile, palms up for welcome. She recorded herself reading the lines, slow, rhythmic, musical, so Oliver could practice anywhere. And he did. By day 3, he wasn't memorizing. He was performing. His posture changed. His fear loosened. He began suggesting his own gestures, adding drawings to their storyboard. When Richard saw him practicing one night, speaking clear Arabic while mimicking the Nile's curves with his arms. The sight nearly broke him. Oliver looked alive. International Day arrived with all the polished chaos of wealthy parents and theatrical teachers. The auditorium buzzed with designer outfits, cameras, and eager chatter. Richard sat in the front row, heart pounding harder than during any boardroom negotiation. Backstage, Oliver trembled. Celeste was allowed only in the audience, but she crouched beside him behind the curtain for one last whisper. "Remember," she said, touching his shoulder, "you're telling a story. And nobody tells this story like you." He nodded, hands shaking. When third grade took the stage, children in cardboard collars and golden wristbands lined up. Mrs. Whitmore introduced them. Then she called Oliver. The room went still as he stepped to the microphone. For a moment, panic washed across his face. His breaths came shallow. Richard's own chest tightened. Then Oliver lifted his hands, the gesture for sunrise. The memory clicked. He began. His voice, steady, rhythmic, spoke in Egyptian Arabic, each word shaped with surprising accuracy. Parents exchanged startled glances. The Egyptian families leaned forward, recognizing not just the language, but the dialect. Line by line, he told a miniature story of Egypt, its history, its warmth, its people. His hands danced with the phrases Celeste had taught him. At one point, he actually smiled. When he finished, a hush held for one stunned heartbeat. Then applause exploded through the auditorium. Afterward, in the lobby, Oliver clung shyly to Richard as parents approached. A tall man extended his hand. "Dr. Karim Hassan," he introduced himself. "Your son's Arabic was exceptional. Where did he learn?" Before Richard could answer, Oliver pointed across the room. "Miss Celeste taught me." Heads turned. Celeste stood near the exit, half-hidden, coat in hand, still dressed like staff, not a star teacher. Mrs. Whitmore hurried over, eyes wet. "Miss Williams," she said breathlessly, "I owe you an apology. I gave Oliver something impossible. And you saved him." Dr. Hassan added, "My wife runs the language department at Northwestern. Your methods, story, movement, culture are cutting edge. We'd like to meet you." Then came Patricia Holbrook, designer dress, polished composure, her voice low and sincere. "I misjudged you," she said. "If you're willing, Ashford Investments would like to bring you on as a consultant. Not as staff, as a partner." Offers poured in like water breaking a dam, tutoring inquiries, school invitations, university interest. Celeste stood stunned, caught between the life she'd lived and the life suddenly offered. I need to think," she whispered to Richard. "Take your time," he said gently. "Just know one thing. You deserve to be seen." That night, surrounded by flashcards she no longer needed to hide, Celeste whispered a truth she'd never dared speak. "Maybe it's finally my turn." 3 weeks after International Day, life seemed to move faster than Celeste could breathe. She split her days between Oliver's lessons, consulting for Ashford Investments, and preparing for an interview at Lincoln Park Academy. Her son Darius applied to pharmacy school, something he'd been afraid to even dream of. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel dangerous. Then disaster struck again, not in Oliver's life, but in Richard's firm. Ashford Investments was finalizing a massive $200 million multinational deal involving teams from Saudi Arabia, Germany, Japan, China, and the US. 6 professional translators had been scheduled. Cultural consultants were prepped. Stakes were sky high. 2 hours before the meeting, the Arabic translation team called in sick, severe food poisoning. The backups were unavailable. Remote interpreters couldn't handle the layered legal and cultural nuances required. David paced the hallway. "We can't negotiate blind. If we misinterpret one clause, we tank the whole thing." James looked panicked and angry. "We never should have relied on a fragile translator chain. This could sink us." Richard's mind darted to Celeste. He hesitated. This wasn't a small meeting. This wasn't Romano. This was global politics, money, legacy. David broke the silence. "Richard, call her." Minutes later, Celeste stood in the boardroom doorway, wearing a simple suit, clutching a notebook. She knew the tension instantly. She could feel it in the air. Richard pulled her aside. "This is different. High stakes. If this goes wrong, people will say we pushed you too far. It could hurt your future more than ours." Celeste inhaled. "I won't fail." She reviewed 50 pages of documents in 30 minutes, circling economic terms, rewriting legal concepts in ways she could translate cleanly. She asked Richard three-pointed questions that stunned the junior analysts. She understood the deal better than most of the team. At 9 a.m., the boardroom filled. The Saudi delegation entered first, led by Prince Khalid Al Saud, sharp-eyed and formal. The Germans followed with clipped precision. The Japanese team bowed politely, quiet and observant. The Chinese advisor took a seat in silence. Richard and his partners braced themselves. Celeste sat at the center of the table. No headset. No notes except her small notebook. Prince Khalid spoke first in formal Arabic, dense, ceremonial, testing her. Celeste matched him, using respectful honorifics and referencing cultural principles in exactly the right tone. His eyes softened, just slightly. The Germans jumped in next, firing technical legal terms. Celeste translated seamlessly to Arabic, then to Japanese, then to Mandarin, then to plain English. Her voice flowed like water between continents. When the Japanese delegates expressed a concern indirectly, she explained the cultural subtext so the others wouldn't misinterpret it as indecision. When the Chinese advisor whispered a pointed comment to the Saudis in Mandarin, she stepped in calmly, translating without embarrassment, keeping the room aligned. James watched her, stunned. This wasn't translation. It was orchestration. Then came the hardest moment. Fiduciary responsibility. No clean translation existed across the 4 foreign languages. Celeste didn't blink. For the Saudis, she linked the concept to Islamic principles of trust. For the Germans, she used precise legal phrasing. For the Japanese, she framed it as duty and honor. For the Chinese, she tied it to relational ethics. Every team nodded. Everyone understood. Prince Khalid leaned back, impressed. "Miss Williams," he asked, "where did you study Islamic finance?" "I didn't study formally," she answered. "I studied people. Your culture. What matters to you?" The prince smiled, genuine, rare. A 4-hour meeting ended in 90 minutes. Agreement reached. Hands shaken. Barriers dissolved. Then something no one expected happened. Prince Khalid began clapping. The Germans joined. The Japanese joined. Even the silent Chinese advisor clapped softly. A standing ovation, in a boardroom. After the delegations left, James approached her, eyes lowered. "Miss Williams, I owe you an apology. You proved me wrong. Completely." Celeste offered him a small, gracious smile. "You were protecting your company. I understand." David stepped forward. "We want you on salary. Not as a translator, as a partner. Ashford and Williams Consulting. If you're interested." Patricia added, voice warm. "We were wrong about credentials. Wrong about you. We want to make this right." Before Celeste could respond, Richard appeared with someone beside him. It was Darius, her son. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide with pride. And Celeste, seeing him there at the peak of her triumph, finally let herself believe. Maybe her whole life had been preparing her for this moment. The boardroom ovation still echoed in Celeste's ears when Richard guided her toward the glass-walled conference room next door. Inside stood the dean of Northwestern's language department, Professor Layla Hassan, a Chicago Tribune reporter, and, most shocking of all, her son Darius. Darius looked older than Celeste remembered, tired from night shifts, from managing his diabetes, from carrying dreams too heavy for their finances. But today, his eyes shimmered with pride. "Mom," he whispered. "I saw the whole thing." Celeste covered her mouth, overcome. Richard had flown him in quietly, wanting him to witness the moment his mother stepped fully into the light. Professor Hassan stepped forward. "Miss Williams, we've spent weeks studying your methods. What you did for Oliver, and what you did here today, is extraordinary. We'd like to offer you a position." Celeste blinked. "As the lecturer?" "No," the dean said warmly. "As a pedagogy fellow. We'll sponsor your certification. You'd help redesign our community curriculum. You'd start immediately." He handed her a folder. Inside, salary details, an office assignment, and a $50,000 consulting bonus from Ashford Investments. Celeste's hands shook. I've never had an office," she murmured. "You have one now," Richard said. "Right next to mine." Before she could respond, the Tribune reporter stepped forward. "I'm Maya Rodriguez. I'd like to tell your story. Not as a fairy tale, as a challenge to the system that almost missed you." Celeste looked at Richard. He nodded gently. "Your choice." Maya clicked on her recorder. "What do you want people to know?" Celeste took a slow breath. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "For 20 years, I've cleaned rooms like this, she said. I listened through walls while brilliant people talked about deals, languages, ideas. I taught myself 7 languages in the spaces between their conversations. She paused, steadying herself. I wasn't invisible because I lacked talent. I was invisible because people thought my job meant I didn't have any. Darius stepped closer, squeezing her hand. Celeste continued, there are millions like me, housekeepers, janitors, nannies, people with gifts nobody bothers to ask about. We're not rare. We're overlooked. The room fell silent. Oliver suddenly burst in, curly hair messy, smile wide. He ran to Celeste and held up something small and worn. The very first flashcard she ever made. You kept this? She whispered. It was the first time I wasn't scared to learn, he said. You saw me. Celeste's tears finally spilled. The entire room softened, executives, professors, prince's representatives, all witnessing the moment. Richard stepped forward. Ashford Investments is establishing the Williams Fellowship, he announced. $1 million fund for people with talent, but no credentials. We're partnering with Northwestern to create pathways for overlooked adults. Patricia added, we're launching company-wide talent assessments. No more assuming skill based on job title. We want to know everyone's gifts. Even James smiled, humbled. Miss Williams, thank you for proving me wrong. Then Prince Khaled reappeared in the doorway, hands folded behind his back. Miss Williams, he said warmly, my family foundation would like to work with you to redesign our school language programs. And my daughter would be honored if you'd tutor her. Celeste stared at him, unable to speak. He bowed his head slightly. Today, you translated more than words. You translated hearts. The offers kept coming, schools, nonprofits, corporations, but Celeste's eyes stayed fixed on one person. Darius, her son, the reason she had scrubbed floors for decades. The reason she'd buried her own genius to provide stability. Mom, he whispered, voice cracking, say yes. You've told me to dream bigger my whole life. It's your turn. Something finally unlocked in her. I accept, she said. The room erupted in applause. Later, as the crowd thinned, Richard stood beside her at the window overlooking Chicago's skyline. How does it feel, he asked softly, to finally be seen? Celeste pressed her palm to the glass, watching the city glow. It feels, she said, voice trembling, like the beginning of everything. 6 months later, the same school pickup line where this story began looked completely different, not because the scenery had changed, but because Celeste had. She stepped out of her modest new car wearing a neat blazer and carrying a leather briefcase, not the faded tote she used to hide her flashcards in. Parents who once looked past her now stepped aside, smiling awkwardly, unsure how to greet the woman whose name had appeared in the Chicago Tribune, on university flyers, and across social media as the invisible linguist who changed everything. Lincoln Park Academy buzzed with whispers. Celeste no longer stood near the exits with nannies and drivers. She walked through the front doors as an honored guest, now a consultant for the Academy's learning program. A woman who had once told Celeste to wait outside with the staff approached shyly. Miss Williams? My daughter struggles with French. Would you consider tutoring her? Celeste gave a gentle, confident smile. Send me her details. I'll see if I can help. There was no bitterness, just grace. Her life had become a whirlwind of purpose. Twice a week, she commuted to Northwestern, where she taught community-centered language pedagogy. Her own office, was covered in student artwork and maps pinned to the walls. She worked with neurodivergent children through a new research initiative she helped design. Her book outline, The Invisible Experts, sat on her desk, already requested by 2 publishers. The Williams Fellowship funded vocational training for workers with untraditional backgrounds, hotel staff, rideshare drivers, cafeteria workers, people whose talents had been buried by circumstance. And Darius? He was now a first-year pharmacy student, full scholarship from Prince Khaled's foundation. His insulin was fully covered for the first time in his life. Richard, too, had changed. He and Celeste co-led a nonprofit, the Language Justice Initiative, which created pathways for adults without degrees to enter corporate communication roles. He had become a present father, not just a successful one. Oliver, thriving with proper autism support, now spoke 5 languages conversationally and greeted Celeste every week with a hug and new vocabulary to show her. One sunny afternoon, Oliver ran into Celeste's arms at pickup. Miss Celeste, guess what? I taught my friend how to say welcome in Arabic today. He said it made him feel seen. Celeste laughed softly. That's what languages do, sweetheart. As they walked toward her car, ice cream tradition awaiting, Celeste's phone buzzed. A message from Maya Rodriguez, the Tribune reporter. Your story has reached 12 million views. Thousands are sharing stories of overlooked talent. You've started something. Celeste exhaled slowly. She hadn't meant to start a movement. She had only tried to save one little boy from fear. But movements often begin with love. The camera of this story would pull back here, showing Celeste and Oliver walking through the schoolyard, surrounded by nannies, custodians, cafeteria workers, delivery drivers. People society walked past every day. Miss Celeste, Oliver asked suddenly, are you happy now? She paused, looked at the sky, at the trees, at the boy who had trusted her before the world did. Yes, she said, I finally am. A soft voiceover would rise in this moment, the message she wanted the world to hear. For 20 years, I was invisible, not because I lacked talent, but because people assumed my job defined my intelligence. But I wasn't the only one. Every day, you meet someone whose abilities you've never asked about. The person who brewed your coffee, cleaned your building, bagged your groceries. Talent is everywhere, hidden not by failure, but by lack of opportunity. She continued, want to change the world? Start by asking someone who serves you, what do you dream of? What do you love? What are you capable of? And then actually listen. Share opportunities. Challenge bias. See people. And remember, some of the greatest minds you'll ever meet won't be carrying resumes. They'll be carrying struggle. They just need one person to ask the right question. Oliver tugged her sleeve. What question? Celeste smiled. Who are you really? They walked on, sunlight warm around them, laughter drifting through the air. And for the first time in her life, Celeste felt not like someone who had stepped into a new world, but someone who finally belonged in it.